Before Samuel Colt, if you were a soldier facing a mounted enemy or a settler facing a raid on the frontier, you had one shot. One shot. Then you had to stop, reload, pour powder, ram the ball, reprime the pan, 15, 20 seconds at minimum, against an opponent who could fire arrows 20 times a minute. A single-shot musket was not a weapon that won fights. It was a weapon that determined who got the first shot. After that, you were done. Samuel Colt changed that forever. Samuel Colt was born in Hartford, Connecticut in 1814. His mother died when he was 6. His father was a textile manufacturer, and young Samuel grew up around machinery, taking things apart, figuring out how they worked. At 16, already fascinated by mechanics and explosives, he signed on as a sailor aboard the brig Corvo, bound for India. On that voyage, watching the ship's windlass, a ratchet and pawle mechanism used to raise the anchor, something clicked. He saw how the ratchet locked into each tooth as it turned. He saw how you could apply the same principle to a gun cylinder, a rotating chamber that locked into alignment with the barrel each time the hammer was cocked. He whittled a wooden model right there on the ship. By the time he returned to Boston, he had the idea for the Colt revolver. He was 16 years old. The problem was money. Colt's first prototypes, built in 1832, were disasters. One failed to fire. The second exploded. He had a brilliant idea and no resources to develop it, so he reinvented himself. He became Dr. Colt, a traveling showman who toured North America demonstrating the effects of nitrous oxide, laughing gas, to paying crowds. Part scientist, part entertainer, entirely shameless. He performed in theaters, taverns, and town squares for 2 years, saving every dollar. With those savings, he hired gunsmiths, built working prototypes, and in February 1836, at age 21, he received U.S. patent number 138 for his revolving cylinder pistol. His first company, the Patent Arms Manufacturing Company of Paterson, New Jersey, began production that same year, and immediately ran into a wall. The U.S. Army wasn't interested. Established gun makers dismissed him. By 1842, the company had failed. Colt was broke, his patent nearly worthless. He spent the next 5 years pursuing other ventures, developing electrically detonated underwater mines, building telegraph lines. Brilliant work. None of it made money. It seemed like the revolver was over. Then came the Mexican-American War, and a letter from a Texas Ranger named Samuel Walker. Walker had used the Colt Patterson revolver against Comanche warriors in Texas and had seen firsthand what a repeating firearm could do in mounted combat. He wrote to Colt with specific improvements: make it bigger, make it more powerful, make it easier to reload in the saddle. The two men collaborated by letter. The result was the Walker Colt, the most powerful handgun in the world at the time. General Zachary Taylor ordered 1,000 of them. With a $25,000 government contract in hand, Colt was back. He persuaded Eli Whitney Jr. to manufacture the guns. He delivered the order within 6 months. He had been waiting 11 years for this moment. He was 32 years old. Now Colt built something that went far beyond guns. In 1855, he opened the largest private armory in the world, on the banks of the Connecticut River in Hartford. A facility so advanced it became a destination for industrialists and engineers from across America and Europe, who came to study how it worked. His superintendent, the brilliant engineer Elisha Root, had developed specialized machinery that could produce gun parts to tolerances so precise they were completely interchangeable. Every screw, every spring, every cylinder pin, made by machine, to exact specifications, so that any part from any Colt revolver could be used in any other Colt revolver of the same model. This sounds obvious today. In 1855, it was revolutionary. Before Colt, guns were made one at a time by skilled craftsmen. Each gun was slightly different. If a part broke, you went back to the gunsmith. Colt's factory changed the entire philosophy of manufacturing. If 80% of the work was done by machine, you didn't need skilled craftsmen for most of it. You needed workers who could operate machines, and you could train them quickly, pay them less, and produce vastly more. By 1856, the Hartford factory was turning out 150 guns per day. Historians call Colt's Hartford Armory the prototype for America's Industrial Revolution. His manufacturing methods were studied and copied by industries that had nothing to do with guns: sewing machines, clocks, agricultural equipment, eventually automobiles. Henry Ford didn't invent the assembly line from nothing. He built it on foundations that included Samuel Colt. The guns themselves changed America in ways that are still felt today. The Colt revolver gave the Texas Rangers, a force of fewer than 100 men, the firepower to patrol and protect a territory the size of France. It armed the Union and Confederate armies during the Civil War. More than 300,000 Colt revolvers were used in that conflict. And the Peacemaker, the Colt single-action army revolver introduced in 1873, became the defining weapon of the American West. Every cowboy, every lawman, every outlaw, every marshal in every frontier town. The gun that Wyatt Earp carried, the gun that shaped the mythology of the American West. The Peacemaker was called the Great Equalizer because in the hands of a smaller or weaker person, it equalized the contest with someone larger and stronger. A 60-year-old homesteader with a Colt had the same firepower as a 25-year-old raider. Whether that equalizing was ultimately good or bad for American society is a question the country is still debating, but the transformation it caused is beyond dispute. Samuel Colt died in January 1862 at the age of 47, just as the Civil War he had helped arm was getting underway. He was one of the wealthiest men in America. His estate was worth around $15 million in today's money. He had succeeded, failed, reinvented himself as a showman, succeeded again, failed again, and then, on his third attempt, with a government contract saved by a letter from a Texas Ranger, built an empire. And along the way, almost incidentally, he had invented the manufacturing system that would industrialize America. So what does Samuel Colt teach us? First, the idea is not the business. Colt had the right idea at 16. He failed twice building businesses around it. The gap between a brilliant invention and a successful company is enormous, and bridging it requires persistence, reinvention, and sometimes just waiting for the right moment. Second, find your Samuel Walker. Colt had a breakthrough idea but couldn't get traction. Walker had battlefield experience and knew exactly what the product needed to become. The collaboration between inventor and end user, someone who truly knows the problem, is often what turns a good idea into a great one. Third, the manufacturing method is the invention. Colt's revolver was important, but his assembly line, his interchangeable parts system, was arguably more transformative. How you make a thing can be as significant as what you make. The process innovation outlasted the product. And fourth, failure is not the end of the story. Colt's first company collapsed. He spent 5 years doing underwater mines and telegraph lines. He was broke and dismissed. Then the Mexican War happened. Walker wrote his letter and everything changed. The right moment came, but only because Colt had never stopped being ready for it. We began with a soldier who had 1 shot. We end with a nation armed with 6. A 16-year-old on a ship to India, whittling wood and watching a windlass, set in motion a chain of events that industrialized America, armed the frontier, and created the manufacturing philosophy that Henry Ford would eventually turn into the modern economy. That is what it means to make America. Thank you for joining us for Episode 7. Our next episode is Edwin Drake, the man who drilled the first oil well in Pennsylvania and accidentally invented the modern energy industry. Until then, stay curious.